We talk to engineers, technology people every day, and they're trapped in a different way than most people think about. We normally think that more money, the higher the salary that we get, the more freedom that we have, because overall, that's what people are after is not necessarily a bigger salary, but more freedom. And they think they get more money, they get more freedom to do things. But what's really happening is they're getting more money, higher salaries, more benefits, and they're becoming trapped. And this weird paradox that we have is that we've become self-enslaved, and no longer are we owning things, but not only does our job and our employer own us, but the stuff that we have owns us. And it takes away all of our ability to make decisions, to have the freedom to explore things that we want to explore, such as a lot of people who want to explore businesses or just want to have a job that they feel like funds their life, but not a trap. If you enjoy this kind of content, check us out. We are the Company of One by Dale Callahan podcast. We talk about this kind of stuff every week about how you can become more successful. So check that out. We are also on YouTube for those of you that are more on the video side of things. Here's some things that we're going to talk about today that a lot of people don't ever consider. We're going to talk about three things that employees don't really consider, but owners do. And when I'm talking about owners, I'm talking about operators, the people who are in charge of their career and their income. I hope that's you. I hope that's who you are becoming. And we're here to help you become that. You don't have to be an independent entrepreneur in the sense of, hey, I run my own business, I'm playing venture capital and all that kind of stuff. That's not what that means. It means that you are in charge of your career, that you pick who you work for, that you pretty much pick your salary. But that's a case of another time. First of all, step one, the first thing that I see is one of the biggest mind shifts that I have seen coming from the students that I've worked with over the years that are all corporate people is understanding the difference between an asset and a liability. And this is a struggle for most people because we've been actually most of us haven't been taught. One of the things I've noticed is most technology people don't know much about money. They know about money, they read about investments, they get hyped up about Bitcoin or some stock investment, but they don't really understand how money works. And the difference between the haves and have nots are often more about money. And when I say have and have nots, this is not the poor and the rich. It's the people who have freedom versus no freedom. Is because a lot of people have high incomes and are in fact enslaved by themselves. So here's the difference. Rich Dad Poor Dad covers this really well. Is an asset versus a liability and what's happening. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. So what does that mean? Your job is an asset. It brings you money, right? Your abilities, the skills that you have. I don't necessarily mean the education and the degree because we know that may or may not bring you money, but your ability to put them to work is an asset. More typically, though, an asset is maybe like a rental property or a business that you own or some intellectual property. If you wrote a book and that book sells you, if you make $10 a month off of that book, that's an asset. It generates revenue for you every single month. Probably the typical one we see is the stock investments, the 401ks, the bank accounts that pay you a dividend or interest or some other kind of gain every single month, and or over the year, I should say. So an asset generates money for you. And so when we have assets, they make us money. Now let's flip that around. A liability does just the opposite. It sucks money away from you really fast. For many people, and there's controversy whether my own personal home is an asset or a liability. Who cares about the controversy? It's kind of how you use it. For many people, their own personal home becomes a liability, just the way they use it. But let's talk about more typical ones. Your automobile. We go out, we buy automobiles. Typically, we borrow money to buy an automobile. That's money going out of our pocket every month, going the other direction. We have, of course, the maintenance on the automobile. And here's the thing: the automobile, unlike the home that you live in, doesn't go up in value. Almost always, it goes down in value. So it's a liability. It's You're losing money every time you buy a vehicle, every time you buy a boat, every time you buy a four wheeler or any kind of thing that goes down in value. And I know many people say, "Oh, my car! I've got one of these most valuable cars," and they're going to raise in value. Really? There are some people that do that, that can buy certain kinds of cars, and they know the money game, but that's not how they make their money. Cars are, generally speaking, what I see driving around, their money sucks. It's just sucking the money out of people's pocket. And so many other things you have. What do you spend money on? If you look at what most things we spend money on, but they begin to own us rather than us own them. There are all kinds of toys, uh, electronics, you name it. So we'll just categorize. If you think about everything you spend money on, and if you look over it over the year and say, was this an asset or is this a liability? And I'm thinking usually big things, right? And if it's not generating you cash, it's not an asset. So here's one thing that I have noticed. Well, actually, here's one thing that comes out in Rich Dad, Poor Dad is owners, people who have freedom buy assets, and people who are employees buy liabilities. And that's a general statement, but I think it's pretty accurate. When I look around at the people, I don't care what your pay rate is. I don't care if you're making $40,000 a year or $400,000 a year. Most people do the same things. They buy liabilities like crazy. They love their liabilities. They're passionate about their liabilities. We've got to buy the best car. We got to buy the best computer. We got to buy the best watch. We got to buy the best, kitchen appliance. We go over to somebody's house and we see, oh, they've got the cool coffee maker. So we feel like we need to have that coffee maker, even if you don't like coffee, right? We buy this kind of stuff all the time, and it goes down in value. You can't resell it for nothing, right? It's not an investment. So this is what we see is the biggest difference, not income between owners and employees. All right, an owner that is making 150,000, for instance, he asks different questions. Now, you could be an employee technically of a company, but if you are making 150,000 at your day job and you're sitting there thinking, okay, now I'm going to save some money. I'm going to put some money aside. I'm going to buy some assets, and maybe I'm going to just save off a little bit every month of my paycheck. I got to pay for food and shelter and those kind of things, and I'm going to save up until I get $10,000 to $20,000. And at that point, I'm going to use that money and look for some asset that I can buy that I can use that money for. That sounds simplistic, and you might say you can't buy a rental house for 20,000, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be all kinds of things that can bring you money. It might even be some intellectual property that you create, such as a course, a tool, a book, or a framework, or some consulting gig where you go out and you sell people a framework you developed. All of these are assets, and wealthy people spend more time on developing the assets because every time we buy something, it generates cash for me. And that's what we want. So is if you have a six-figure salary and you are buying liabilities, more cars, more boats, more fun toys, then you're getting broker by the day. And if you're going out and you're making $40,000 and you're buying assets, you will end up out earning that person that has a higher salary. So this is a hard part. This is something, assets often look boring at first. Assets don't, they're not super exciting because they're not flashy. They're not something I drive around to impress my neighbors or my friends. And usually that's the first sign it's a liability when I'm buying it to impress somebody. But this is the first thing, and it's a game changer. I remember a friend of mine, he's a dentist. He owns a dental practice with his partner, who's also a dentist. And when I first explained this to him, he came up to me and he says, I go out and buy a new car or everything. I'm pretty frugal with money, but I still buy things. He says, my partner, he will save up a little bit of money and he'll go buy something. It may be something he can rent out and not necessarily even a house, but he just is constantly buying property and buying things that generates him cash. He says, and I've always thought he was kind of silly because I was driving the nicer car. I was looking like I was making the kind of money that we were making, and he looked like he was just doing okay. And he says, but now I look at him and he's extremely wealthy, and I'm basically where I was 10 years ago. And it's just that simple. Assets versus liabilities. Think about that. That's where you need to be spending your time if you're wanting to operate like an owner. If you want to operate like everybody else, then just spend away. But there's a big difference. And this is where real freedom comes from, right? So now, related to this, the second point here is that you need to be okay to look poor. I remember somebody telling me that one time, Dale, you need to be okay looking poor. And he didn't necessarily mean poor, broke, destitute, but he means quit trying to look rich. I've heard Dave Ramsey saying something like that. Everybody's out there trying to look like they are rich. I don't know what rich means, but usually it's richer than you are. And because rich is a variable term, right? Most of the people that I know that are wealthy, truly wealthy, don't care what anybody else thinks. They're not trying to impress people. We've had people over at our home before that we've had some 2 or 3 people over here at one time, and the wealthiest person by far in the group, that's a person of significant wealth, drove a Chevy. The other people were driving BMWs and nice new shiny BMWs and nice, very nice vehicles. And they were doing okay, but they were a little bit slaves to their money. This other guy he was not there to impress anybody. Nobody, he came, he left. Nobody knew how much he was worth. And they probably still don't today because he's not advertising it. He doesn't care. Why should he care? And I have noticed that from the people who are truly wealthy, they generally don't look the part. But not because they can't look the part. Sure, some people like cars. If you're a car guy and you want to go buy a car, or you like nicer clothing, whatever works for you. But usually we don't want to spend money on just everything we see because they're wealthy. They think about money differently. They think about the assets thing I just talked about. They had rather be buying things that generate cash so they're not having to work, so they're not slaves, rather than looking like they're wealthy or wealthier, so they are slaves, right? The old adage of if you pull up at a red light and you look beside you and there's a brand new shiny Mercedes, and over here there's a 5-year-old vehicle that's in okay shape, maybe it's a pickup truck, all right? And that person's probably wealthy. The person driving the nice new shiny car, the more expensive, this isn't likely true, that person is either broke or heading toward broke. We've had people tell us as they were getting married, for instance, talking about where they're going to live, and a family member told us one time, I'm not going to be poor. And I remember thinking, yeah, I think you're heading to poor. You're not going to look poor, but you're going to be poor because that's the lifestyle that you are living. You are driving yourself into poverty, trying to impress everybody else. You need to be okay because nobody cares Dave Ramsey's got a famous saying, buying stuff to impress people that could care less. He says it better than that. But that's what we do is we buy things to impress other people. What does that say about us? I want my house to look this way. I want it to have these kind of things because I want other people to look at me and think I'm impressed. Because when they're impressed by you, they just talk about you anyway. So let's just think about what does it, what are you really wanting to impress people with? So we want to accept that we look successful when we don't care. And that's one thing that I have noticed with people over time is that the truly successful people are not out to impress me or their friends or anybody else. They don't care. They don't really care what you think or what I think about what they're doing. That's not their mission in life. Other people are really hypersensitive to you being impressed by what they have, and it gets them down and depressed. And if this is you, you've ever bought something shiny and new and shown it to your friends and thinking, oh, wow, they're going to really be impressed, and you don't get the reaction you want, and maybe they're jealous, but maybe they just don't care. It's a letdown. It's a letdown. And that other people just don't care. They just don't care. I'm surrounded by people who have significant wealth all the time, and probably so are you, and you might not know which ones are which, right? Sometimes it's hard to tell. You can't tell by going to their house. You can't tell by looking at what they drive. You can only tell by getting to know them a little while because they're not probably talking about it very openly either. So be okay with that. Be okay with focus on what do you need to do to serve you and your family? What matters to you? Why are you trying to impress these people? What's driving you? Are you driven by some kind of pride issue? Are you proud of that? That's what drives you, that when you see something on Instagram or social media that you've got to have it, are you proud of that behavior? Do you realize you're being led by marketeers? You're not in charge of you. Other people are in charge of you. Is that who you want to be? No. Be okay looking like who you are. Stop trying to impress people with the money you don't even have. But for the third thing here is to look at your job as venture capital. Now, I think this came from Cody Sanchez and some LinkedIn posts that she had put out. And I thought it was really interesting. If you look at your job as venture capital, meaning it's your income from your job is investing in you to do things, right? Now, it can either invest in buying the toys and the liabilities we talked about or buying assets. But when you think about it buying assets, one of the biggest assets we have is our ability to earn. Whether it's skills, whether it's certain talents you have, whether it's knowledge you have inside of an industry, whatever that is if you look at your income as funding, because when we get venture capital, when we get angel capital, when we get all these fancy terms, that's really all it is. When we get income from venture capital or angel capital, these are fancy terms, but all they are is they're funding the growth of the company. Because without money, they cannot grow. You already have that. You already have angel capital and venture capital. That was Cody's point. If you have a day job, don't just walk away from your day job and say, I'm going to go start some high venture and then go out and try to raise money. That's a typical approach that I see. Go use your money from your day job to fund your venture. Sure, you've got to have money to live on and you've got to take care of the responsibilities of your family. But if you manage your money well and quit trying to do these other things, quit trying to look rich, you got plenty of money. It doesn't matter where you live in the United States. I realize some places are more expensive than others, but you still can play the game and have plenty of money and live comfortably and safe and eat well. You have to be thoughtful maybe about some of those things in some cities, and some it's just easier. But use that money to fund where you want to go. What is it you want to do? What is the business that you want to start? What's the lifestyle that you want to have? Start thinking about that, where you're trying to do, and use that money to fund those things. Use the money to fund your future instead of just to fund looking rich and playing the rich person. Use it as venture capital, because the job is not going to be where you build wealth. Now, look, you can, in at least in the United States and most industrialized countries, if you have a good job and you play the game fairly well, you will be a millionaire. But that's not going to necessarily make you truly wealthy over a long period of time, yes. But where most wealth comes from is not, people don't become wealthy by being the vice president of a big company or this. The people that truly become wealthy in those domains are very few. It's the CEOs and the top executives of major Fortune 100 firms. Okay, that's not many people. And likewise, actresses and sports stars, that's not where most of the wealth comes from. They're also very few, because for every famous actress or musician or sports star, there's hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands that are just getting by, or worse. Where most of the money is made is business owners. And that's just the data. Dramatically, if you look at where the billionaires come from, if you look at most of the wealth comes from, it is in business owners. And this is why people in the United States, the tax base is so heavy on small business owners, because large businesses, there's some of them, but there's not that many. There's significantly more small businesses, and they may be making a whole lot of money, but they're not a big, large business. And so that's where you're going to make your money. And so how do you get from where you are today to there? You start. And whatever you start is probably going to take some kind of funding. Maybe not much, but some kind of funding. The average business in the United States to get started, I think, was $7,000. And a lot of that is stupid money. In other words, they bought stuff they didn't need. Sure, some businesses take more than that, but it doesn't take much. So here you are in your day job. You've got time, you got energy, and you got money. You got all the things that you need to grow and to start a business, whether it's a business where you are truly operating or whether you are actually just buying assets and you're going to be an owner, such as buying real estate or some other kind of asset. Those are the kind of things that you might have be a business of just being a raw investor. Okay, here we have the people with the same incomes. I see this all the time. People with the same incomes, very different outcomes. And what's the difference? It's the mindset. If they're thinking like an employee, I've got this money and I got to look rich, or they're thinking like an owner, I don't care what people think. I'm worrying about truly taking care of my family and growing wealth and serving people. I don't care what other people think about me, whether I've got the shiniest car or the nicest coffee maker. We don't really care. That's the move that you want to make if you want to move into some kind of business. The financial moves is to start understanding the difference between assets and liabilities. So you don't have to be a financial genius, but buy assets, right? Quit worrying about what people think, or be okay looking poor. Be okay with not looking rich. And then, of course, the last thing is to let your day job fund your business and use it, as Cody says, as venture capital. Thanks for listening here. If you do this, if you like to watch stuff, we do this on YouTube. If you go to the Company of One at YouTube, we'll put the links down below. The podcast, it goes out on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, goes to all these places. The Company of One podcast. And we do this once a week, and we're here to help you grow.